The kitchen was alive with the rich, savory aroma of roasted turkey, a scent that wrapped around the room like a warm embrace. Sarah Mitchell, a 30-year-old woman 9 months pregnant, moved carefully, her hands steady as she arranged a sprawling platter of appetizers. The tablecloths were ironed to crisp perfection, and each place card bore a guest's name in her meticulous handwriting. Every detail of this Christmas party was her doing, alone. Despite the weight of her belly and the ache in her back, Sarah had planned and executed this gathering single-handedly, a silent testament to her role as the family's anchor. From the living room, the carefree chatter of her mother, Margaret, and younger sister, Chloe, floated in. They lounged on the couch, phones in hand, scrolling through social media with no thought to the effort unfolding in the kitchen. Sarah, an accountant with a steady income, had been the financial backbone of the household since their father's death 5 years ago. Margaret leaned on her for medical bills and living expenses, while Chloe, who had dropped out of college to chase dreams of becoming an influencer, contributed nothing but complaints and half-hearted promises. Sarah's sacrifices were invisible, her efforts taken for granted. "Wow, Sarah's really outdoing herself again," Chloe said with a laugh, her tone dripping with mockery rather than admiration. Margaret chimed in, her voice light but cutting. "She's always been like that. Tries to handle everything, then acts like the world's against her when she's exhausted." Sarah turned away, forcing a smile to mask the heaviness settling in her chest. She wasn't just the eldest daughter, she was the one keeping this family afloat. Yet their words stung like a blade. As she set out the silverware, a sudden wave of dizziness nearly brought her to her knees. She eased into a chair, careful not to draw attention. Her breath shallow. She couldn't afford to show weakness, not when any complaint would be met with laughter or accusations of being dramatic. But before she could steady herself, Margaret's sharp voice cut through from the living room. "What do you think you're doing, Sarah? That's Chloe's seat. Being pregnant doesn't mean you get to slack off. Get up." The room went quiet, all eyes turning to Sarah, a 30-year-old pregnant woman, scolded like a child in front of relatives and family friends. The air grew heavy, the festive warmth replaced by an icy tension. "Mom, I just needed a moment," Sarah said softly, her voice trembling. Margaret stormed over, grabbing her arm to pull her up. A sharp pain shot through Sarah's body, and she gasped, clutching her side. Then, a calm but commanding voice broke the silence from the doorway. "What in God's name is going on here?" Everyone turned. There stood Eleanor Grayson, Sarah's grandmother, leaning on a cane. She was supposed to be too frail to attend, yet her presence filled the room with an undeniable force. The guests froze, the atmosphere shifting under the weight of her gaze. Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes locked on Margaret. "Yelling at a pregnant woman? Have you no shame? Sarah's not your servant. Have you ever stopped to think about how much she sacrifices for this family?" Her words were steady but sharp, cutting through the pretense like a knife. Margaret flinched, attempting a nervous laugh. "Oh, Eleanor, I'm just keeping her in line. You know how she is." "No," Eleanor said, her voice low but unyielding. "The ones out of line are you and Chloe. Family doesn't exploit their own. Family shows gratitude, not entitlement." The guests' murmurs grew, their once indifferent glances now turning to Margaret and Chloe with judgment. Chloe opened her mouth to speak but bit her lip, her eyes dropping to the floor. Eleanor moved to Sarah's side, gently pulling out the chair beside her. Leaning in, she whispered, "You've given enough, dear. It's time to live for yourself and your child." The words pierced Sarah's heart, melting the walls she'd built to endure years of silent sacrifice. For the first time, she felt seen. That night, in the quiet of her room, Sarah sat with her phone, staring at the app that tracked years of financial support, hospital bills, rent, Chloe's fleeting whims. Each transfer was a reminder of her role as the family's lifeline. With steady hands, she began canceling each scheduled payment. One by one, confirmation messages flashed across the screen. Transaction cancelled. With each tap, the weight in her chest lightened. "No more," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible but resolute. An email from the bank confirmed the accounts were severed. The flow of money, Her money had stopped. The house was silent, the noise of expectations fading into the background. This wasn't revenge, it was liberation. Sarah was no longer the dutiful daughter, the selfless sister, or the family's personal ATM. She was a woman reclaiming her life, ready to build a future for herself and her unborn child. The next morning, Sarah woke to a clarity she hadn't felt in years. Margaret had posted a TikTok video titled "A Mother's Heartbreak," abandoned by her daughter on Christmas. In it, Margaret sat alone in a corner, her face lit dramatically, tears staged for sympathy. The captions painted Sarah as cruel, ungrateful. Comments poured in. How could her daughter do this? What a heartless woman. The video had already gained thousands of views, with donations flooding Margaret's account. But Sarah wasn't the same woman anymore. Eleanor's words from the night before echoed in her mind. "You're not a servant." She opened her laptop, pulling up years of evidence, bank statements, receipts for Margaret's medical bills, even photos of Margaret shopping at high-end stores during her supposed hardship. Sarah's fingers hovered over the keyboard, then began typing. She wasn't seeking vengeance, she was setting the record straight. Her social media post was simple but devastating. "This is not a rebuttal. This is the truth." Attached were PDFs of every transaction, every receipt, every proof of her silent support. "While pregnant, I carried my family in ways no one saw. This is what that looked like." Within minutes, comments flooded in. "This is unreal. She did all this while pregnant? The mom's story doesn't add up now." The narrative shifted physical demands of her pregnancy. She was determined to reclaim her life. Sarah's post went viral, the truth spreading like wildfire. Margaret's carefully constructed facade crumbled as the comments turned against her. Chloe, once an aspiring influencer, saw her follower count plummet, her dreams of fame slipping away. The family's financial stability, built on Sarah's sacrifices, began to unravel. Sarah, however, felt a calm she hadn't known in years. This wasn't about revenge, it was about freedom. With Rachel's support, Sarah moved forward. She met with the lawyer, who helped her secure her finances and protect her future. "You've been taken advantage of for too long," the lawyer said. "We'll ensure you're not tied to their demands anymore." Sarah nodded, a spark of hope igniting within her. She wasn't just fighting for herself now, she was fighting for Noah, her unborn son. Days later, Sarah left the family home with a single bag, her steps heavy but her heart resolute. She arrived at Rachel's house, where a warm hug and a cup of tea awaited. "You're stronger than you know," Rachel said, and Sarah believed her. That night, as she rested a hand on her belly, feeling Noah's gentle movements, she whispered, "We're going to make it, little one." Weeks later, Sarah gave birth to Noah in a quiet hospital room, holding him in her arms. She felt a love so fierce it erased the pain of her past. "Welcome to the world, Noah," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. She moved into a small apartment, sunlight pouring through the windows, a space that felt like hers. A crib held Noah's books, a nod to the childhood she hoped to give him. One day, a letter arrived from James. His words were simple but powerful. "Would it be too much to hope for a future with the three of us, you, me, and Noah?" Sarah's heart stirred, memories of their shared dreams flooding back. The life they'd once planned, the love they'd shared, could it be hers again? As she held the letter, a new chapter began to take shape. One where Sarah, Noah, and perhaps James could build a future together. The weight of the past lingered like a shadow. But for Sarah Mitchell, the flicker of hope was growing brighter. After the Christmas party that shattered her illusions, Sarah, now 30 and a new mother, was ready to rewrite her story. The air in Rachel's cozy suburban home felt like a sanctuary, a stark contrast to the stifling tension of the house she'd left behind. Rachel, her college friend and confidant, opened the door with a warm smile, her hazel eyes brimming with concern. "You made it," she said, pulling Sarah into a hug that felt like coming home. On the table sat a steaming mug of chamomile tea and a plate of homemade shortbread cookies, their buttery scent mingling with the faint pine aroma from a small Christmas tree in the corner. For the first time in weeks, Sarah's shoulders relaxed. the knot in her chest loosening just a fraction. "Rachel, I need to tell you everything," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Rachel nodded, her presence steady and unshakable. Over the next hour, Sarah poured out her heart, her words tumbling like a dam breaking. She spoke of the years spent paying Margaret's medical bills, covering rent, and funding Chloe's fleeting dreams of influencer fame. She described the silent demands, the guilt trips, the way family had become a chain around her neck. "I couldn't even say yes to James," she admitted, her voice cracking, "not because I didn't love him, but because I was too trapped to see a way out." Rachel listened, her hand resting gently on Sarah's, offering quiet strength. When Sarah finished, tears streaked her face. "I'm not wrong for wanting out, am I?" she asked, her voice small but searching. "You're not wrong," Rachel said firmly. "You've carried them for too long. Sarah, you're not alone anymore." Those words sank deep, like rain on parched earth. Rachel didn't just offer comfort, she offered action. That afternoon, she introduced Sarah to her friend, Emily Harper, a sharp-witted family lawyer with a reputation for entangling messy financial disputes. Emily's office was a small, sunlit space downtown, cluttered with legal books and framed photos of her kids. As Sarah laid out her story, bank statements, transfer records, and years of unspoken burdens, Emily's brow furrowed. "This isn't just emotional manipulation," she said, tapping a pen against her desk. "You've been financially exploited. We can protect your assets and ensure you're free from their demands. Let's get to work." Together, they mapped out a plan. Emily reviewed Sarah's financial records, identifying every transaction that had drained her savings. She filed paperwork to redirect Margaret's government aid to her own accounts, exposing the facade of Margaret's senior citizen living alone status. Sarah felt a spark of empowerment as she signed the documents, each signature a step toward reclaiming her life. "You're not just closing accounts," Emily said with a smile. "You're closing a chapter." Days later, Sarah's world shifted again. In a quiet hospital room, bathed in the soft glow of dawn, she gave birth to her son, Noah. The moment she held him, his tiny, warm body nestled against her chest, the pain of her past seemed to dissolve. "Welcome to the world, Noah," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks as his tiny fingers curled around hers. The loneliness that had haunted her for years melted in the face of this new love. Noah's soft coos and curious eyes were a promise, a future she could shape on her own terms. With Rachel's help, Sarah moved into a modest apartment on the west side of town. The place wasn't grand, but it was hers. Sunlight poured through large windows, casting warm patterns on the hardwood floors. A second-hand crib sat in the corner, adorned with a mobile of tiny stars and a stack of picture books Sarah had loved as a child, The Velveteen Rabbit, Where the Wild Things Are. She arranged them carefully, imagining the nights she'd read to Noah, his laughter filling the space. A small potted fern sat on the windowsill, a symbol of new growth. Each morning, as she sipped coffee and watched Noah sleep, Sarah felt a quiet strength building within her. This was her home, her life, her beginning. But the past wasn't done with her yet. Margaret's TikTok video, a mother's heartbreak, abandoned by her daughter on Christmas, continued to gain traction, painting Sarah as the villain. Comments like, "What kind of daughter abandons her mother?" stung. But Sarah was no longer the woman who bowed to guilt. She'd already posted her truth, bank records, receipts, proof of Margaret's lavish spending during her supposed hardship. The tide was turning. Local news outlets picked up the story, and hashtags like #TruthAboutFamily and #SupportSarah began trending. Margaret's victim narrative crumbled, and Chloe's influencer dreams faded as brands dropped her, unwilling to associate with the backlash. Sarah's resolve was unshaken, but the emotional scars lingered. One evening, as she rocked Noah to sleep, a pale gray envelope slipped through her mail slot. The handwriting stopped her cold, "James." Her heart raced as she opened it, the words pulling her back to a time when life felt full of possibility. To Sarah, it began, "I've thought of you every day since we parted. I know you needed to choose yourself back then, and I respected that. But seeing you now, so strong, So brave. I can't help but hope. Would it be too much to dream of a future with the three of us, you, me, and Noah? Sarah pressed the letter to her chest, her breath catching. She remembered their first date. James's warm laugh as he said, "I love how you take on the world, Sarah." She thought of the small apartments they'd toured, dreaming of a life together. Back then, she'd been too burdened to say yes, too afraid of losing herself to her family's demands. But now, with Noah in her arms and a new life unfolding, the possibility felt different. Could she step back into that dream, this time with Noah by her side? Each night, as she tucked Noah into his crib, Sarah felt the weight of her old life fading. The apartment, though simple, was a canvas for her future. She hung a small photo frame on the wall, a picture of her and Noah, his tiny hand clutching her finger. The future was no longer a shadow, it was a light. And Sarah was ready to walk toward it.